I thought of entitling the 3-volume series More Than You Would Ever Want to Know About Mind Only, you know? And we had a fellow here whose name escapes me who taught some Christianity course that was known in the department as the Faith Breaker. And this is my Faith Breaker course. If you ever thought that Giluk Pascalas had it all right, it relieves you of that. What I've been trying to do in the presentation of these 3 volumes is to present it in such a way that you don't get completely fed up with it and put it down, but you have unavoidable complications that come just because the text is, you can't, once you're doing a synopsis, you've got to do a synopsis of that chapter. You can't say, but also a person could turn to reflections on reality, which hopefully at this point you could read with ease. So, I read this morning, but where are we? What page? Oh, that's, yes, in the text. So where is this in the synopsis?
I think probably about 62.
Handling complex vocabulary, yes. Okay, let's read the synopsis. So there's complicated usage of the vocabulary, the 2 truths, as you know, of existing ultimately and existing conventionally, and as we know now, this means existing as an ultimate or existing as a conventionality. When the Tibetan will be the same. We'll have Kunzop Yerba and Turntambar Yerba, which could be, as we learn, is either that adverbial accusative can be translated as or as li, right? We're just starting, in fact. Believe it or not. And so there's no difference in the Tibetan, except when you explain it, you can add in syllables and so forth, right? The objection, and existing substantially is tseyu, existing imputedly is dayu. The problem is that the Sutra Unraveling the Thought says that whatever is a compounded phenomena is not ultimate. So then, how could you say that Shenwang are Turntambar Truba, right? Turntambar Yerba. If they're not Turntam, this is the objector's viewpoint. Turntambar Mayina, Turntambar Mebekap. If it is not an ultimate, it is necessarily not ultimately existent. That's the objector's idea. Why does the objector think that?
Seems logical.
Yeah. Now, why is that the intuitive read? That Turntambar Yerba means Turntam Ba Yimba Yerba exists as an ultimate rather than exists ultimately. Right? And in the sutra, where do you find any counter evidence? It's where it says that Gunda Rangitsenyi Kivinebe, right? Because Gunda do not subsist by way of their own character, which suggests that the others do. And where it says something like Kang Rangitsenyi Kimena Magiveka, whatever doesn't exists by way of its own character is not produced. But you could say, Shenwang, Rangitsenyiki, Trukyang, Tuntamba, Meva. Tuntamba, Meva. So then you'd have to prove that there's an equivalency between Tuntamba Yoba and Rangitsenyiki Yoba, right? How would you do that? Is there anything to cite in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought? And then Tunshik Yimba, Sungu Yorabe. Does it make an equivalence between Tuntaba Yoba and Rangitsenyiki Yoba? Sungu Yomare. So you see, Tsong-kha-pa earlier had to make the case that Tuntamba Truba Tan Rangitsenyiki Truba Tunjik. What does Tunjik mean?
Same meaning, synonymous.
Synonymous or equivalent, right? That's George's refinement. It's George's refinement that should say equivalent. So the Sutra Unraveling Thought doesn't say that. So Tsong-kha-pa, I think we're on chapter 7, is it? In chapter 6, made the point that Rangitsenyiki Yoba and Tuntamba Yoba mean the same thing. Is he pulling a fast one? Where is chapter 6 in the translation? Yeah, look at 2:14. Look in the middle. On this occasion, in the Asaṅga's grants of bodhisattvas, it is said that conceiving imputational factors to exist by way of their own character. So, I mean, once you can't find some source in the sutra, you've got to find it in Asaṅga, or Stiramati or somewhere. You can't find it in Asaṅga, you go to Vasubandhu. You can't find it in Vasubandhu, you go to Stiramati, right? If you can't find it in Stiramati, you're in deep.
What about Vinitadeva?
I thought you might say something like that. You're in deep. Because that's too late, you see? Too late. You got to go to early Yogacara and to the founders, the very important personages. So now, look at the quote on the top of 13. There are those who adhere to things upon superimposing a non-existent own character. He's using the term own character, which could mean in Wanchuk's way a unique definition, or in Tsong-kha-pa's way, Rangitsenyiki Truba. To the nature of imputational words, it's not the words themselves, but the things imputed by words. To the phenomena of forms and so forth, and the things of forms and so forth. So here we have Asaṅga talking about own character being falsely superimposed on imputational natures. What are the imputational natures he's talking about? Megugunda. So there's a clear statement, at least, about own character with respect to Megugunda, but you said just Megugunda. Is that what Asaṅga's talking about? Just any old Megugunda? Okay. And then he goes on to say, so that takes care of that one. Do you follow? To the nature of imputational words. But now we didn't say what the Yugugunda that is concerned with is. We just identified the Megugunda. So now if you take the Yogyu-gunda that is being misperceived as Rangitsiniki-truba, what is that? What is that? I mean, it's so obvious, it's, you know, you've been saying it. Juxi Yimba. That form is, that this bottle is a referent of the term form of a bottle is established by way of its own character. There's a misconception that its being the referent of the term bottle or anyone like it, okay, or any term, is established by way of its own character in, you know, and that means in the inherent, in the object itself. That there's a, you could say, a suitability for naming that inheres in the object. So, but it is a Yogyu-gunda that this bottle is a referent of the term bottle or any other name one wanted to use. So, but that's not Rangitsiniki-truba in the object. What is it? How would you just describe it if it's not Rangitsiniki-truba? Yes, Tokwe Daksam. Tokwe Daksam to Yoruba. Now, what does that mean? Beginningless usage of language. From beginningless usage of language, objects get, this is the referent of some terminology. I think in English we could say a language-created phenomenon.
But is it language or conceptuality? Because they say that babies have
Either way,
consciousness.
either way, either way. When you press on language, then you move to conceptuality. But it's both. Because beginningless time, etc., etc. These predispositions, so but they're correct. So there are predispositions that bring this over and make us so that we're not idiots, right? And there are other predispositions that make us see this fact as inhering in the object and not being conceptual, language created or conceptuality created. So you can see that there's more force if, unlike Tsong-kha-pa, others will say, well, that really doesn't exist, you see, even with my hand. If something exists, it's got to be there, right? It's just something made up by language and conceptuality. You follow? Therefore, that Yurbe komichur, Tobe taksan to Yurbe de, Yurbe komichur. You see, other people are saying, don't keep emphasizing that these things that are dire, Tobe taksan to Yurbe, do function as Yurbe, as existing. Because then people get the idea, oh, it is, right? It is a referent of terms. It is a referent of conceptuality. And I mean, you have to understand emptiness in this system before you can understand that it isn't. Do you follow? You're making a distinction in words that you can only understand when you have penetrated the most profound meaning in mind only. So as a soteriological tool, a liberative tool, it might be better to say, well, these things don't exist as reference of terms. But then, of course, how you posit somebody else's understanding you want bread, or it's very difficult.
So where does Tsong-kha-pa get his basis for saying Yobe Kocha instead of Komicha? Like where it seems like everything you said that the coming from the mind-only literature wants to say Komicha, and he wants to say, is he just because he wants to say that, or is
Well, it's either Giant Sheva or Ngawam Beltan who says that in Prasangika, everything is Dopetaksan to Yoga. And if you're not going to let that function as Yoga, how can you say that there's a compatibility between emptiness and dependent arising? So in Prasangika, Dopetaksan to Yoga de Yoga culture God. It must function as existing. I mean, that's what he keeps pushing on. Otherwise, you can't have a compatibility of emptiness to dependent arising. Emptiness would cancel dependent arisings. And so it may be that this is being brought back to the mind-only school, that even they can posit that something exists if it is right? They can posit that yimba forms being a referent of the term form, yoga, right? Jukshi yimba. Yore. Yimba yore does exist.
so there's
So if they composite this with respect to Yurgyu Kunda, and the Prasangikas are just taking that sort of teaching and spreading it out further, although even their meaning of Tope Taksam is more subtle. And as George puts forth in his thesis, Gelugpas, if you put them on us, compared to certain Sakya writers, they are the Gelugpas are semi-realists, and the Sakyas more, what do you say?
Conceptualist.
Is that his word? Conceptualist. But what he's saying also makes sense. Well, I mean, that you're not granting a status of existence in Prasangika to these things that are just Tope Taksan. Because they want to plummet you to the realization of ultimate truth. Undercut. Whereas we keep saying, oh, things do conventionally exist, but, and we think that means inherently exist, because we don't know what conventionally exist means. You see, we don't know. Until you realize the absence of inherent existence, you can't understand conventional existence as conventional existence. But on the other side of it, if you think that the ultimate analysis undoes all these phenomena, then it undoes karma, So, but those other systems have ways of, your teacher saying, until you get to that state, you've got to keep practicing this and practicing that, and keeping you within ethical bounds. But then the suggestion is that once you get the realization of emptiness, well, I mean, it is true that for Buddha, you're beyond karma. Even Gelu. But Gelu is never refuting karma. The ultimate wisdom doesn't ever refute karma. So we still haven't gotten to the point of, looking at this section, but that's all right. we're moving ahead. And for next time, please read the next chapter. That's chapter 8, in both the synopsis and the translation. You'll find I think you'll find that it's more comprehensible. It's very short. Good.